Good afternoon. On behalf of the Federated Church of Orleans, I want to welcome you to this third annual community conversation. The Federated Church of Orleans is an all-inclusive, open and affirming congregation of the United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalist Association. We are a house for all people. We are the home of HaYam, Cape Cod's Havara, where jointly we pursue matters of justice for all people, near and far. Immigration is probably one of the most divisive issues in our country today. Many of us find ourselves torn between protecting our borders, upholding the law, and caring for and welcoming refugees. Here at Federated, we wrestle with matters of faith, and it is our faith that teaches us to welcome the stranger. And so for us, wrestling is not political, it is faithful. Praying to God, seeking not the cruelty and hatred that this world offers, rather seeking loving kindness and compassion for our neighbor. And so I welcome you to this, Who is My Neighbor? Reflect and respond to the immigration crisis.
Thank you so much for those good words, Darren. And I'll second that good afternoon and welcome you all on behalf of our two sponsoring groups today. The Interfaith Justice Committee of HaYam Havara and the Federated Church, and the Refugee Support Team of Nasset Interfaith Association. There, I got that all out. I didn't know if I would be able to. Okay. So, as Darren said, for this third annual community conversation, we've chosen a theme that could hardly be more timely. The media is saturated this year with news about immigrants and the administration's deportation policies. So why would we want to hear more of that today on a beautiful summer Sunday afternoon? Well, our focus here intends to be on the faith traditions that we hold, sometimes different from one another, but often much in common, and what they have to say to us in this crisis and how they might lead us to act through our faith communities. When did the connection first dawn on your mind and heart? Maybe it was way back during the campaign or the inaugural with their promises of deporting millions of human beings. Maybe it was in a service of worship seen by the nation where a bishop spoke quiet truth to power, pleading with a president to have mercy on the vulnerable ones in God's name. For me, it was partly a call from a friend, a leader in an immigrant congregation, saying, I don't know what to do. People are so scared. We had to cancel our English class. They're not coming out. Maybe it was when a good troublemaker in your congregation spoke up and said, we've got to do something to help. Maybe it was the sudden recognition that an immigration family in a pew near you and in a home near yours could be torn apart any moment by masked marauders. Maybe it was when a federal agency declared that the building where you worship and pray is no longer protected space, that federal agents could enter at any time and arrest fellow worshipers. But at some time it became clear to you that in a way it might not have been before, that the treatment of immigrants, our neighbors of worth and dignity, is a crisis not just for them, but for all of us, people of faith. But if so, what's a faith community to do in response? What's our calling? For some congregations, it raises the age-old debate about the connection between worship and social action, between religious life and political life. For some, hearing a clarion call to action, the question becomes, but what can we do? The issue is so big and complex and scary. Today we'll listen to some faith representatives reflect on what it is their traditions teach and what leaders are saying now. And then we'll hear from several folks rooted in faith traditions who are responding through their action. Now, because we have such a bounty of presenters, we haven't prepared a time for questions and answers during the program. And instead, we hope you'll all stay for a while for refreshments downstairs, where you'll have a chance to speak individually with any of today's presenters. So we'll begin by listening to three reflections, brief reflections, on immigration from teachings and declarations of three strands of tradition. We would have more and should have more faiths represented, but due to time and availability of speakers, we're focusing on the three strands most represented here in the Lower and Outer Cape. So first we're going to hear from Rabbi Neal Gold, spiritual leader of HaYam, also a teacher and writer, and you can read more in the program. Second, representing a Roman Catholic view, we welcome Jeff Corrigan. He'll be standing in for Tom Ryan, who's unable to be with us today. Tom put much love and work into planning this event, but complications from an infected foot have sidelined him. Jeff will be using the reflection that Tom prepared. Jeff retired after 32 years in Catholic lay ministry, focused on social justice and church planning. He's the author of several books and comics, one of which on migrants won an award. And thirdly, I'll be speaking from the Protestant Christian perspective. So, Rabbi Gold, may I call you up first?
Thank you, Rod. It is such a privilege to be here. I got to say, this is the first community event that I've been invited to since I joined the Chavurah here about a year and a half ago. So it really is a delight and an honor to be here with everybody, and I appreciate the invitation. You can hear me okay? I'm hearing impaired. I'm very sensitive to sound systems and such. So I was asked to just say a few words about what compels me as a Jewish community leader about this particular issue today. And I will say right off the bat that I am far from an expert on what U.S. immigration policy should be. It is a complex topic, and we all need to recognize, I recognize that there is room for good, decent, ethical, and thoughtful people to debate and disagree about different ways forward, about what our national policies should be. It is also clear to me that there's a crisis in our country right now, and the crisis is not specifically the immigration issue, but the cruel and often hateful responses that are being perpetrated in our names often, and unbecoming of a nation that purports to be one nation under God. I'm talking about the scapegoating and the targeting of immigrant communities all around the country, and even more broadly, the violence that's associated with the movement and the coarsening of the American soul that I see in the name of protecting us from violent immigrants. I speak as a Jew, and I speak as someone who is steeped in millennia of Jewish literature, starting with the Hebrew Bible, but I also speak as someone who carries the weight of Jewish history in my genetic code. So what compels me to come and speak about this crisis today? One of the things that compels me is the administration's brutal and often sadistic pledge to deport millions of our neighbors, friends, employees, etc., to tear communities apart, to trample on our freedoms, and frankly, to cause grave danger to our economy. I'm compelled by grotesqueries like Florida's so-called alligator Alcatraz, which individuals giddily celebrate and think is an extraordinary and wonderful thing. I find it to be a scourge on our national character. I'm compelled by ICE arrests without warrants, often by masked thugs, often violent, which I consider to be the worst excesses of an authoritarian regime, perpetrated with no due process, held against people not accused of crimes, but simply because they want to deport them. And closer to home, there are hundreds of immigrants being held in Plymouth County Jail here in Massachusetts, despite long-standing complaints about inhumane conditions and so on. I find all these things are unfolding dizzyingly in real time, and they terrify me in the depths of my soul. As a Jew, I come here on a couple different levels. First of all, I'm compelled by Jewish spiritual wisdom on this topic. And downstairs, I prepared for you a source sheet of some of what I consider some of the most obvious texts about why people who have a Bible-based tradition should be compelled by this, why Jewish spiritual wisdom informs me to take a stand on behalf of besieged immigrant communities in America. You know, more than any other commandment in the Hebrew Bible, we are commanded over and over again, no less than 36 times, but probably more than that, to protect the rights and dignity of the stranger. The stranger meaning the resident minority who lives under your domain. That is the recurring refrain in the Hebrew Bible, and that's one of the things that compel me. But I gotta be honest, it's not really the Bible that compels me about this issue and that brings me here today. It's two ideas much more recent in Jewish history. I included this on the source sheet that I'll make available for you as well. One of them is from a great American Jew who you probably heard of, a great American Jew named Emma Lazarus. Emma Lazarus and her family were among the earliest Jewish arrivals in America. She was one of the outspoken voices for the American Jewish community in the 19th century. Among other things, she was a forceful advocate against anti-Semitism, both for the besieged Jewish communities in Europe and here in North America in the 19th century. But as you know, Emma Lazarus was the voice that wrote that incredible poem called The New Colossus that was inscribed on the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. As a loyal American and a loyal American Jew, she wrote those immortal words that were inscribed on the Mother of Exiles. "Keep ancient lands your storied pomp," cries she with silent lips. "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free the wretched refuse of your teeming shore, and send these homeless tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." We learned that in grade school, right? Did we mean it? It's one of the questions we want to ask ourselves. The other thing that compels me, and this is a little darker, is the story of the MS St. Louis, the so-called Voyage of the Damned. In May 1939, the St. Louis ship left Hamburg, Germany, with more than 900 Jewish refugees from the Nazi assault all over Europe. It crossed the Atlantic. First, it arrived on the shores of Cuba with these refugees and was turned away. It passed within a mile of the Florida coast, petitioning U.S. officials to mercifully allow these refugees to enter. And the U.S. Secretary of State Cordell Hull and Franklin Delano Roosevelt refused to intervene or allow these people entry. The Canadian authorities denied them entry, even though it was only 2 days away by ship. After seeing the lights of Miami from their boat, these refugees were cruelly returned to Europe, disembarking at Antwerp, where many were arrested and sent to Auschwitz or Sobibor or the other Nazi killing factories. When I think of Emma Lazarus, when I recall the St. Louis, what compels me to be here today is I see the faces of those detained by ICE. I see the children and families who have been separated. I see refugees around the world fleeing from terrorist totalitarian regimes, and I respond not out of pity and not out of sympathy, but out of a place of recognition. Because as a Jew, I recognize these faces, and that's why it's so compelling to me, and I hope to all of us, to say no to our administration's deportation agenda and to end the thuggish tyranny of ICE. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi, for that beautiful introduction. I'm sitting in for Tom Ryan, and he has put together a wonderful presentation. But just wanted to start with where the Catholic teaching comes from. We believe in both thought and action. And I'm doing the thought part, and Ken will be doing the action part. So the fact that I'm just talking about principles, please, we do more than that. And Ken's going to spend a lot more time talking about action. Our tradition of social doctrine begins with Pope Leo XIII in 1891, who, Jesus didn't talk about the Industrial Revolution, right? So he's trying to make sense in 1891 of all the changes brought about and how should the church respond. It's a very early version of what would Jesus do. And from that came teachings about all kinds of issues by the popes that followed. Now, people have been asking me, well, is Pope Leo going to overturn Francis's work? Well, just take a look at what name he chose. He chose the name of the founder of Catholic social doctrine. So we can expect him to do some great things. And Tom put together a wonderful quote from him from 3 weeks ago that I'd like to read. But first, Catholic social doctrine on immigration has 3 parts. One is the right to migrate. There's a human right to migrate. The second is the right for nations to control their borders. So these are two goods that we have to balance. But the third one that doesn't get talked about is the right of a person to remain in their native place. There are many people, we think we're the greatest country on earth. Everyone wants to come here. Well, a lot of people don't want to come here. They have no other choice. Helping them have a choice is one of the goals of church teaching on immigration. Here's a quote from Pope Leo 3 weeks ago. Many migrants, refugees, and displaced persons are privileged witnesses of hope. Indeed, they demonstrate this daily through their resilience and trust in God as they face adversity while seeking a future in which they glimpse that integral human development and happiness are possible. In a world darkened by war and injustice, even when all seems lost, migrants and refugees stand as messengers of hope. Their courage and tenacity bear heroic testimony to a faith that sees beyond what our eyes can see and gives them the strength to defy death on the various contemporary migration routes. He's not saying immigrants are a problem to be solved. Immigrants are messengers of hope. And here's a quote from Pope Francis from February 2025. I have followed closely the major crisis that is happening in the United States with the initiation of a program of mass deportations. The rightly formed conscience cannot fail to make a critical judgment and express its disagreement with any measure that tacitly or explicitly identifies the illegal status of some migrants with criminality. This current administration constantly says, well, they broke the law. They're illegals. The noun is illegal. At the same time, one must recognize the right of a nation to defend itself and keep communities safe from those who have committed violent or serious crimes while in the country or prior to arrival. That said, so again, he's keeps balancing these different goods. That said, the act of deporting people who in many cases have left their own land for reasons of extreme poverty, insecurity, exploitation, persecution, or serious deterioration of the environment. So he's saying, people don't have choice a lot of times. These are reasons why they do it. This damages the dignity of men and women and of entire families and places them in a state of particular vulnerability and defensiveness. This is not a minor issue. An authentic rule of law is verified precisely in the dignified treatment that all people deserve, especially the poorest and most marginalized. The Anoim, as Jesus talked about. I exhort all the faithful of the Catholic Church and all men and women of goodwill not to give in to narratives that discriminate against and cause unnecessary suffering to our migrant and refugee brothers and sisters. With charity and clarity, we are called to live in solidarity and fraternity and avoid walls of ignominy, to build bridges that bring us ever closer together. And that's Pope Francis. And Pope Leo has given every indication that he plans to continue and enlarge on the teachings of Pope Francis. Thank you.
Strange thing happened on the way to this reflection. I learned that John Calvin was a refugee crisis director. Now, most people have probably heard of John Calvin, the thinker behind much of the Protestant Christian Reformation, and the popular image of him as being very austere and judgmental. But Geneva, as it turns out, where Calvin ministered in the mid-16th century, was a hub for refugees. They came from all over Europe, driven from home by wars, religious persecution, and more. And Calvin, who had been a refugee himself, worked hard to feed and shelter and provide health care, establishing benevolent funds for the purpose. And he preached and worked against the xenophobia of some Genevans who accused newcomers of taking jobs, lowering wages, etc. Does it sound familiar? The notion of welcoming the immigrant has deep roots in Protestant communities, from experiences as well as from the Bible texts that have been mentioned already, and are shared among our traditions and beyond. Now, Calvin was not alone among Protestant reformers in his concern for refugees. Martin Luther turned to the Bible story of Abraham and Sarah welcoming the three godly strangers to their tent, and Luther said, "Let our homes be open to exiles, and let us assist and refresh them." John Wesley, credited as the founder of Methodism, famously said, "The world is my parish." But there are Protestant churches and other Protestant churches and still other Protestant churches and on, of course. And of course, teachings and social policies differ just as historical circumstances differ. But if there's a foundational Protestant notion that most opens us to the welcome of refugees and immigrants, it might be this: a belief that the Bible teaches that we, all of us humans, are flawed and totally depend upon the loving grace of God in order to be accepted. And as receivers of that grace, we in turn are to love and accept our neighbors. The individual conscience in relationship to God is our guide. It leads us to work for a just society where everyone is free to accept God's grace and love and to act on them. It's a society where the formerly oppressed are free. That is a command that goes back to Moses, of course, that the refugee should be welcomed into the community and protected by its laws. Now, Protestants have not uniformly risen to these faith challenges, whether sanctioning slavery or joining in efforts to exclude immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, or supporting MAGA positions today. We have not always welcomed the stranger. But there has been something of a continuous thread winding through all the differences. Examples might be opposing the 1898 Chinese Exclusion Act, helping to resettle Vietnamese by the thousands in the 1980s. And in times like ours, some have found guidance in the Barmen Confession of the German Confessing Church, which led its members to peaceful resistance to Nazi authority. Witness the U.S. sanctuary movement of the 1980s, starting when churches in the southwest U.S. refused to ignore the needs of Central American migrants virtually dying at their doors. And so it is that now, when masked agents with government authority abduct neighbors from our streets, many Protestant governing bodies and members are joining to give voice to conscience over unjust laws. This year's Ash Wednesday declaration emerged from Church World Service, a cooperative ministry of 37 denominations, called Defending Refuge. It's now been signed by well over 3,000 churches and individual leaders. And I'll end with just a very brief portion of this declaration. Together in faith and rooted in love, we resolve to continue in the centuries-old practice of Christian communities, walking alongside refugees and immigrants in their pursuit of safety and dignity. We pledge to restore and promote hospitality and welcome to those seeking refuge, regardless of where they're from, how they pray, or what language they speak. Guided by our faith, we stand together against the sweeping measures that are devastating vulnerable families and jeopardizing their futures. These actions not only cause immediate harm, but also threaten our country's long-term ability to welcome and support those in need. We stand united in our resolve to love our neighbor as ourselves, to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Now, hearing these teachings from three different traditions leaves no room for doubt. The one we worship loves the refugee, the stranger, the sojourner, and welcoming is one of the basic tasks for the faith community. When those who have come here only to survive and make a better life for themselves are criminalized and deported, people of faith see something unequivocally wrong, something to be called out for what it is, something to be resisted, whether through direct care and protection of immigrants or taking steps to oppose immoral policies. We have examples of each to hear from next. We'll hear about a service center that helps thousands of immigrants each year get services they wouldn't otherwise have. We'll hear about a faith-based legal service agency trying to meet overwhelming needs. And we'll hear about a weekly crowd of witnesses who are bearing witness against ICE at the Burlington ICE facility. So first up is Michael Mecenas, who, relying mainly on faith, has developed the Brazilian Resource Center. It's been continued, or you might say reborn, after a disastrous fire that happened back before Thanksgiving in Hyannis. So Michael, tell us a little bit about your work and what you're experiencing now, especially in the midst of this crisis. And we're glad to have you with us.
Hello, everyone. This is a heavy topic, isn't it? I can feel the atmosphere. Let's take a deep breath. Again. Okay. So first of all, I want to thank each one of you for being here on a Sunday summer afternoon. This topic is extremely important for me and for the community that I represent. Thank you so much for putting this together and also for the invitation. I sincerely appreciate. My name is Michael Mecenas. I am the founder and director of the Brazilian Resource Center, which is a nonprofit organization, 501c3, that provides service for the immigrant, low-income population and homeless here on Cape Cod and the island. Last year, we went through this horrific fire at the place that we were providing all the service, which was 70 Center Street, and we lost everything we had, but we never stopped. We continue daily providing service and welcoming our neighbor, and I am your neighbor. The Brazilian Resource Center has been helping a lot of, not just Brazilians, but a lot of our community members that has been going through this horrific crisis. And sometimes we just see what's in our face, but we don't think about what's actually happening behind those doors. I represent over 3,000 Brazilians on Cape Cod, but also 52 or 53 other nationalities that live here in Cape Cod year-round. At the center, we provide a lot of different services. We provide English classes. We have a beautiful free medical care clinic, that we provide free medical clinic for folks that don't have insurance. We have our food pantry. We provide wellness program, after-school program for kids. We have a ton of programs that we offer. But since we are talking about this crisis, I want you to pay more attention to the topic itself and not actually the program that we have to offer. There is a ton of people out there living in fear. I wish I could play an audio that I received this week of this mother crying, excruciating, begging for mercy, afraid of coming out of her house, afraid of losing her 3-month-old baby. The family that we went to their house and delivered food boxes, and the kids were so afraid, thinking that we were ICE. The kids that don't want to go to school, afraid of coming home and not having mom and dad. The husband that is afraid of leaving their house and not coming back. And the families that don't know what's going on with their family members that has been arrested. This is very, very serious. I am extremely honored to be part of this center that provides service and welcoming these over 8,000 people that we served this year so far. Last year, from January through December, we served over 8,000 people. This year, from January until last month, we already passed that number. The need is there. But the question is, what are we doing? And what can we do? As an immigrant myself, I once had the opportunity to become documented. Not illegal. There is no such a thing as a legal human being. We are all God's created. But the opportunity that I had over 20 years ago, it's gone. If I didn't have the opportunity then, I would not be here right now. I wouldn't be able to put myself through college, finish my bachelor, my master's, pursue my PhD, create a non-profit organization, became a mental health clinician, and give back to my community. Those folks are there. So what are we doing for our neighbors? Are we just quiet? Are we speaking on their behalf? I was in a meeting yesterday with the Chamber, Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. And there is a huge fear about next year, summer of 2026. And you might say, why? J1 visas. Last year we had over 8,000 J1 visas here on Cape Cod. But it was a different administration. Now the new administration is cutting the amount of J1 visas. So we are facing not just the problem with the immigrants that are here right now, year-round, but we all know that we need the J1 visas to support our tourism. So the question is, last year we had 8,000. How many are we getting next year? I have friends of mine and one of my board members that he's American and his wife is Japanese American, and she's afraid of custom. She's afraid of traveling. A really good friend of mine, he's one of my mentors, Carlos Barbosa, was crying last night, driving with passport, driving with his U.S. passport, afraid of getting deported. This is very serious. And it really hits home. Because I know there is a lot of hard-working family there that all they want is a chance. And my question for you is, what are we doing? I had a talk the other day, and I say maybe we can all get together and go to the Rotary and protest. We can't do that. Because if we do that, we're going to get arrested. So they have to talk on our behalf. I have no problem speaking. But we need you guys. The center is there to provide a lot of services and support. We've done tons, we're talking about thousands of caregiver affidavit for folks. I'm not sure if you're familiar with caregiver affidavit form, allowing somebody else to take care of a child. If something happens to you, they can become your legal guardianship for 2 years. Thousands. We're giving away thousands of red cards talking about know your rights. What is your rights? What rights? It's on the paper, but the reality is different. So I commend you for putting this together. I thank each one of you, and I would love to talk to you one-on-one. And please, if you have any questions, we're going to be downstairs after this. Thank you so much. God bless.
Michael, your time wasn't up. That's unusual, isn't it? I want to ask you something, if I may, since we do have a little more time. I know that one of the ways that your work has had to shift in a very painful and heartbreaking way is that you've worked with many, many parents in what we call preparedness work, in going through the real painful process of thinking through, what do I have to be prepared for in case I'm arrested, or my spouse is arrested, or we both are arrested by ICE? And what about the children? We have to make some sort of plan, perhaps for temporary caregiving. And I know from having visited with you that you've been faced with doing a lot of that work. Would you want to say a few words about what that's been like?
Yeah, that's correct. So, as I was mentioning before about the caregiver affidavit form, we had a problem before where a lot of families got separated, and until this day, we still, know that there is families that they can't find their family members or even their kids. Now, with this new administration, it created this giant Goliaths, right, among the community, and they are extremely afraid of being separated from their child. So the caregiver, what we've been doing at the center is providing a package to each family and explain to them, all the details, going over all the details about if something happened, if God forbid something happens to you, what you should do, and have a plan for your family, your child. And we already I'm the only public notary at the center, and I've notarized over thousands of affidavit caregiver affidavits to the communities. And sometimes they don't even know exactly what that means, right? But they know that I need to have that in order for if something happens to me, he will take care of my children while everything, happen, or whether I'm going to be deported or, God forbid, something happens to me. We've been very successful by doing that, and it's still a lot of folks asking for, schools are asking for, daycare providers are asking for, because the fear is, if something happened to me, what am I going to do with my kids? And honestly, right now, they don't really care. If, I have I'm getting detained right now, but I have a family and I have my children at the daycare or in school. They don't really care. So having that piece of paper helps a lot. So that's one of the things that we are doing, plus many others, to support our neighbors during this crisis.
We've heard from a man who puts his heart and his soul into all of his work. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Well, next we're going to hear from Ken Amoriggi, who's legal director for immigration for Catholic Charities of the Fall River Diocese, which covers the Cape. Ken is still fairly new to that position, and it's been a heck of a time to start, right, Ken? Given the incredible amount of need. So, Ken, please tell us something about your experience and that of those that you serve.
Thank you, Rod. First of all, I just want to say I apologize if I'm fumbling around with some papers, but I actually have some quotes and some statistics. I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything. But as Rod said, my name is Ken Amoriggi. I am the legal director at Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Fall River. I officially took the position in September of 2023, but I had a private practice at the time, so I had to wind that down. So I came on board full-time November 13th, 2023. At the time, like I said, I had a private practice for about 15 years in North Providence, Rhode Island. I was also a nonprofit project director and had started my own nonprofit. During that time, I also did 4 years as serving my community as the chairman of the Tax Board of Review in North Providence, and then later or immediately thereafter doing 8 years as a town councilman. During that period, I also had a child, or my wife and I had a child, so I figured I needed to slow down and streamline a little bit. So I said, well, let me do something that I'm passionate about, and maybe just have one job. So I took the legal director position, not knowing fully what was to come, and I'm probably busier now than I ever was. But things happen for a reason, and I do believe I was meant to be there, and I am happily at Catholic Charities. As Rod said, we do cover the Diocese of Fall River, which includes the Cape and the Islands. We actually have sub-offices in New Bedford and, in theory, in Hyannis. There is an office there. We don't travel there much, only because it's basically become a storage room. But we do travel out to see clients directly and do presentations. I believe this is my 4th or 5th time out on the Cape, at least, presenting or doing clinics. So I appreciate you all having me. The reason I was hired as legal director at Catholic Charities was that, like a lot of nonprofits, there was a lot of turnover in the immigration department. Confluence of different events happened, but as of, I believe it was June of 2023, there were 3 employees left out of what was supposed to be a department of 11. There was an attorney who had just started and 2 paralegals. And that's not sustainable, as you can imagine, especially wouldn't be now. So when I was brought on board, one of the things I was tasked with was rebuilding the department, bringing it up to an 11, and presumably, hopefully, supplementing that with some volunteer work. That went pretty quickly, and I am proud to say that we have not lost a single employee in the close to 2 years that I've been there. I don't want to take credit for that. I will say maybe that's a coincidence, or maybe I just hired the right people, but everyone there is very passionate about the work that we do. Technically, there are 4 attorneys, and I say technically because I'm one of them, but I'm not supposed to be taking clients, but the world has thrust me into a position where I'm acting as the director and also taking clients. So there's 4 attorneys. There are 2 paid, and I make this distinction for a reason, 2 paid Department of Justice accredited reps. I'm not sure if you know what that is, but I'm going to circle back to that at the end because I think that is something that's going to be very important to us moving forward as a community. And we also have 4 paralegals. We speak collectively Portuguese, Spanish, French, Khmer, and a little bit of German. So we are able to communicate pretty easily with our client base. We would love to have a Haitian Creole speaker on staff, so if anyone knows of anybody who would like a part-time job, we would happily entertain that notion. After bringing the staff back to full strength, so this takes us to about last summer, let's say. Obviously, as you probably have figured out, I am somewhat into politics, and I could see the writing on the wall. I had a good idea of what was going to come in November, and we started basically streamlining operations the best we could for what we expected to be a crush of need. That was fulfilled. I would say after November, so November 6th, there was some shock amongst the community. We did receive a lot of phone calls, but there was nothing tangibly to be done yet. We didn't know for sure what was going to happen once the inauguration came. We had an idea because we're in a unique position where our president had previously been the president and had 4 years in between to probably come up with some new ideas and new plans. So we were able to project and make some plans accordingly. Oddly enough, January 20th came and we didn't get a phone call. Didn't get a phone call for another week or 2. And now I understand, and to Michael's point, a lot of that is because people were afraid. It wasn't so much that there wasn't a need. People were so afraid so quickly that they didn't know who to trust. And you know, watching the news, reading the media can sometimes be misleading. And there were a lot of things said about the Catholic Church during that period of time, January, February of 2025, that actually led some to believe that we may have been in cahoots with the government. So some of our own clients went MIA at the wrong time. When we needed to know where they were more than ever before and worried about where they were, we often couldn't reach them. People changed their phone numbers, they changed their email addresses. But then once I think our client base and community as a whole figured out that we could be trusted and that they needed us, ever since I would say mid-February, it's been a nonstop onslaught of just story after story, and you know, I could tell some of those, and frankly, I don't want to take up all this time with anecdotes, but you know, when we're downstairs, if you'd like to speak about any of the things that we've seen on the ground level, I'd be happy to do that. With regards to being a Catholic organization, because I was asked to address this, we, I think, do things a little bit differently than other immigration nonprofits do, and it's not in a bad way. What I mean is this: our mission really isn't so much about immigration; it's about helping other human beings. The topic, you know, happens to be immigration, but it really could be anything. And the agency as a whole has a lot of other missions. We have 12 other departments actually. But the immigration department is driven by a need to assist our fellow man. When Jeff was reading Tom's preparation, I held my breath because he started to quote Pope Francis from earlier this year, which is one of the quotes that I have. But luckily, he started right after I had blocked off the rest of it. So I do want to read this quote. So this is a quote from Pope Francis from February 10th of this year. But it's actually largely a quote from Pope Pius XII. And so Francis starts, "I'd like to recall, among other things, the words with which Pope Pius XII began his apostolic constitution of the care of migrants, which is considered the Magna Carta of the church thinking on migration. And this is Pope Pius's quote. The family of Nazareth in exile, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, immigrants in Egypt and refugees there to escape the wrath of an ungodly king, are the model, the example, and the consolation of immigrants and pilgrims of every age and country, of all refugees of every condition who, beset by persecution or necessity, are forced to leave their homeland, beloved family, and dear friends for foreign lands. Pope Francis continues, likewise, Jesus Christ, loving everyone with a universal love, educates us in the permanent recognition of the dignity of every human being, without exception. In fact, we speak of infinite and transcendent dignity. We wish to emphasize that the most decisive value possessed by the human person surpasses and sustains every other jurisdictional consideration that can be made to regulate life in society. And then Jeff picked up from there. The point is that's what drives our agency as a whole. In taking over the department, I realized that our immigration department never had its own mission statement. We had a contest, and actually our intake coordinator had the winning submission. And this is now our mission statement, and I think this speaks directly to the point that I'm trying to make. Our mission statement is, our mission is to provide comprehensive and compassionate immigration services to those facing hardship, poverty, and injustice. Through advocacy, education, and legal support, we are dedicated to helping immigrants and refugees navigate the complex immigration system with dignity and integrity while promoting social justice for all. The way we do that is by directly advocating for people. We don't get into legislative advocacy or public demonstrations. Those are very important. And in fact, I'm going to conclude today by giving some recommendations I was asked to do as to how you all can help the legal system. People who do that work are probably some of the most important people in the immigration battle right now. It's just not how we're set up. We have 11 folks, we have some volunteers, and we have more clients than we could serve in 10 lifetimes. And so we have decided to help them on a one-to-one basis. But you all are here, obviously, because you're passionate and care about this issue. And I implore you to keep up your good work on all the public and forward-facing work that you do. The role of an immigration attorney is complex, to say the least. It's been said that immigration law is, if not the most complex area of law, it's only second to only tax law. The rules and laws change on a now daily basis. And a large part of my job is actually keeping up with these changes and educating our staff and training them, but also training community members. We do lots of trainings for social service agencies, and we even do trainings for immigrants, how to help their brother and sister immigrants. It's really an all hands on deck approach. And immigration law is actually one of the few areas of law where the government does not frown upon non-attorneys assisting others. And I'm sure Michael does a lot of this work, Susan does a lot of this work. You're allowed to actually help immigrants without violating any federal prohibitions or being accused of the unauthorized practice of law, so long as you don't put yourself out there as an attorney. Okay, you need to give that caveat, and again, I'll circle back to this in a moment, but we are able to fill out applications for clients, we're able to represent them in court, we're able to file motions, but these are all things that you all can do or assist with. I see Janet nodding, and she's been amazing. I've met a lot of you before at some of these presentations, and some of you reach out to me on a fairly regular basis, and I encourage you to keep doing so. And if you ever need my contact information, I'm sure Rod or Tom can share it. What I do want to conclude with, short of my recommendations, I'll finish with that, is I just want to give you some statistics that I think are very important to realize what's really going on right now. First of all, we'll start with the I don't want to call them negative ones, but we'll start with the ones that just show how dire the situation is, and then I'll follow up with the brighter picture. In any area of law, obviously, it goes without saying that being represented by an attorney is preferential to not being. I don't have the statistics from every area of law, but I do have some for immigration. And to give you an example, detained immigrants with counsel are nearly 11 times more likely to seek relief, such as asylum, than those without representation. Immigrants who were never detained are still 5 times more likely to seek relief as if they didn't have an attorney. Represented immigrants were more likely to obtain the immigration relief that they sought, and amongst detained immigrants, it's almost a 2-to-1 basis. In terms of what we would call affirmative applications, so those are immigrants who are not in the court system, they're not being potentially deported yet, they're filing something with USCIS, the statistics are about the same. But one thing that's important to note is, in terms of the historical context, say, of just the last 4 years, somebody claiming asylum on their own is about 13% on average likely to succeed. That's obviously extremely low, but that's low for any area of law. But with an attorney, it's closer to 50%. That's a monumental leap. The problem is, obviously, we don't have enough immigration attorneys. We don't have enough people helping immigrants. And that's where you all can come in and your larger communities. It's not all negative, though. I do want to share some good statistics. We hear about the negative in the news because that sells. But there are some, and I didn't know these numbers actually until 2 days ago. So there are some very encouraging trends happening in the court system, the immigration court system. Like I said, the percentage of asylum being approved is historically very low, even prior to the last 4 years. Something odd is happening, though. Just in June of 2025, and this is nationally, 360,000 roughly immigrants were ordered deported. That sounds high. However, roughly the same amount, 359,000, prevailed in their cases in immigration court. 50% is a number that's never been reached nationally. Now, I know it's a 1 month snapshot, but if you look at these charts, it's very indicative of a trend that's basically started, it looks like, this spring. 45,000, almost 46,000, immigrants were ordered removed in June of 2025 locally. However, 3 times as many won their cases. So in the Boston and Lowell immigration courts, that means that their averages are basically unprecedented, the amount of people who are actually winning their cases. And they're doing so at a high rate. In June alone, over 3,000 immigrants were granted another form of relief other than asylum by immigration judges in Massachusetts. That is out of a number of roughly 6,000. So again, well over 50% are winning their cases. How are they winning them? Obviously, some are doing it themselves, but a lot of them are doing it with the good folks like you. So what I wanted to conclude with was Tom asked me to make some recommendations as to how you can all help. The 2 main things that I want to focus on are probably things that, I don't want to say you haven't heard, but maybe that you're not doing. We all know about handing out the red cards, helping people prepare for being potentially either detained or deported. But there are 2 issues that are never really spoken about. One is advocating for permanent and sustainable changes in immigration law. The last reform at a legislative level nationally was in 1990, and that was not even, it wasn't even a full bill. The initial bill that was proposed, about a third of it actually went through. Prior to that, it was 1986. Those 2 instances, though, mostly focused on student and work visas, and those aren't something that we really deal with, right? We're worried about the people who come here, the poor huddled masses, they're being persecuted, they come from places like Haiti that are completely uninhabitable at this point. There have been no changes to the law. that even address those situations. So to the extent that you can get on the phone with your congressmen, your senators, make noise on social media, make noise in the traditional media, a permanent and sustainable legislative action needs to be taken to fix the system. The system is broken. There shouldn't be a legal system where every day a new law or a new policy can come out. It's just not sustainable for either side. And the other thing I would like to recommend, as I mentioned earlier, is what's called a DOJ rep, becoming a DOJ rep, Department of Justice. There are two types. There's partially accredited and fully accredited. Essentially what that is it's a license to practice immigration law before the USCIS or before the immigration court. Anybody can do it, okay? You just need to be 18 years old, basically. And it's not overly strenuous. If anybody needs any guidance, I can send out some literature. But the DOJ is literally seeking people to become accredited to represent immigrants in court. You can make the world of difference, make somebody 11 times more likely to succeed in their immigration case just by becoming a DOJ rep. The only thing you need to do is pair up with an organization or a private attorney who will sponsor you, who will oversee your work or supervise your work. But it's basically a 3 to 6 month process, depending on how intensively you want to study and take classes. Again, I'm scratching the surface. I'll pass out some literature. I'd be happy to share it with the leaders of your congregations, but something for you all to consider, okay? I'm assuming some of you here are retired, maybe have some free time on your hands. It's not a heavy lift, and it's something that is sorely needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I know I've learned some things I didn't know before. And some of it was a bit encouraging, so we're glad to hear that. And those of us who have been in the work of trying to support immigrants really, really cherish knowing that Catholic Charities serves the Cape, and so do CACI, Community Action for Cape Cod and the Islands. Stephanie Souza heads the law department there. And the Justice Center of Southeast Massachusetts, headed by Emily Lung. Such valuable resources, and it can be so painful for those of us who are sometimes trying to support an immigrant or immigrant family, and they need a lawyer, and we have to say, good luck with that, because they're so hard to find. All the Kens of the world are just very valuable right now. This may be a good time to put in a little promotion. In your program today, you'll find some information about how to donate, if you wish to the Brazilian Resource Center or to Catholic Charities for the great work that they're doing. So thank you again, Ken. Finally, I am very happy to introduce a colleague and good friend of my wife Kathy and me from Burlington, Massachusetts. Susan Abramson has been rabbi at Temple Shalom Emeth there for 40 years, recently celebrated 41. Oh, oops. 41. And she has had much to do with beginning of a weekly witness at the ICE facility there called Bearing Witness. I do want to give a caution, though, that if she begins to insist that I say something in Hebrew, say no. Susan, glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's such a treat for me to be here and to see Rod and Kathy, two good friends who I haven't seen for too many years, and we did so much together in the decades that Rod was the minister at the Presbyterian Church in Burlington, and I miss him every day in the work that we're doing, and I actually succeeded Rod I always was like niggling him to try to take over, stage a coup of the Burlington Interfaith Clergy Association, but he always held on to the position. But the minute he left town, I grabbed it. So, but it's great to be here, and it's not so great to have to follow Rabbi Gold, who took a lot of what I was going to say. So thanks a lot for that. But it's wonderful to be here, and like Rabbi Gold, I approach this whole topic of immigration not just from a biblical standpoint or the standpoint of Jewish texts, but from a highly personal, heartfelt, gut-wrenching, personal position. When I grew up, as some of the others of you may have, I was born 10 years after the end of the Holocaust, just 10 years. And when I was growing up, I would see reel after reel after reel of Jews being pushed to the ground by Nazis, Jews being arrested, people standing by and watching all of this happen, and hearing about Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, which symbolized the beginning of the Holocaust, where Nazis and people would just go through the streets of Berlin and other places and just smash the glass windows of Jewish-owned stores. And at the moment, I have my own YouTube channel, and some of what I do is interview survivors of the Holocaust, and I'm currently interviewing a man who survived Kristallnacht, believe it or not, in 1938, who told me how he personally witnessed this happening and Jews being pushed to the ground and forced to sweep the streets. And so whenever I see a video, which I recently saw, of a man in Waltham, 2 towns over from me, an ICE officer, masked ICE officer, no identification, trying to get him out of the car. He refused. The officer took a huge stick and smashed the window of the car and literally dragged him out. When I see that, all I hear is the glass smashing during Kristallnacht. And when I see people being dragged out of their homes or dragged away from their families, all I feel is all of those stories and all of those witnesses I've heard of Jews being dragged out of their homes. And one member of my congregation, who's a Holocaust survivor, tells the same story over and over again. She lived in Budapest, in Hungary, and she was 3 years old at the time. She remembers she and her brother being at home. Her father had already been taken away, and Nazis showing up downstairs, coming up to her apartment and dragging her mother out, and her watching her mother being taken away with her hands behind her back by the Nazis, and she didn't see her again till she was old enough to not recognize her mother when she was able to return. So when I see all these videos of ICE officers with people in handcuffs dragging them away from their families, that's exactly what I feel. So I take this very, very personally. And one text from Jewish tradition that keeps coming back to me is, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. And so that's really resonates with me. And I think we Jews were not able to stand up for ourselves in the 1930s and 40s in Germany and Eastern Europe. And what Michael said resonated so much for me is that his community cannot stand up for themselves right now. It's up to us who have the privilege to do that work for those who are in such danger. So that's what motivates me. I am now in the privileged position of being able to stand up to what is happening, literally and figuratively, what is happening to those innocent immigrants who just want to improve their lives here, law-abiding citizens who work harder than any one of us to just barely make ends meet. it's up to us to stand up for them. And as a Jew, in particular, it's up to me to stand up for those when when others did not stand up for me and my people and my family. So what's happening at the Burlington? So the Burlington Regional ICE office is in Burlington, right, literally down the street from my temple. It would take me 5 minutes to walk there from my synagogue to the ICE office. It's in an office park right behind the Burlington Mall. And somebody just made a TikTok video of parking in the Macy's parking lot and walking from there to the to this ICE office. Took literally 5 minutes to walk there. And so this nondescript building, housing horrible things inside, is happening literally right under the noses of thousands and thousands of people who come to the mall, the Burlington Mall, to shop. There's a beautiful office park right there. It's right in the middle of the office park. It's 2 blocks away from Leahy Clinic. So this is happening under our nose, and the building is so nondescript. It has no sign in front of it or anything. It just says 1000 District Ave. Nobody would ever know what was happening inside. So 4 years ago, during the first Trump administration, a number of my fellow Burlington clergy and I could see what was happening, the horrors of what was happening, and we felt that it was our personal responsibility, since the ICE office was in our town, to go down and to try to make an impact on the building. So we formed a group called Back for Justice, Burlington Area Clergy for Justice. And Rod, I know you would have been right there with us if you were still in town, and Kathy, you too, would have been right there with us. So we started forming a monthly walks. We called them Jericho walks, and so we would gather in front of the ICE building we had maybe 50 to 100 people every month, and we would walk, we would stand, and we would sing, and we would speak, and we would march down to the end of District Ave, because District Ave is like a kind of a small street, not much happening there. We would walk to Mall Road. We would stand along Mall Road, which is right next to the mall, and we would hold up signs and sing and chant there, and so we would reach a lot larger audience. So that was 4 years ago, and since then, this is very complicated, because since then we had what happened, the disaster that happened in Israel and the Middle East, and because of that, my alliance with other members of the interfaith clergy unfortunately changed somewhat. So we didn't have the same coalition. Anyway, I'll go back and talk about. So what's happening in the ICE office right now? They signed a lease with a private owner of that property, and the town of Burlington okayed the lease in 2008 with the condition that nobody would be held there overnight, and that there would be 4 holding cells. People would only be there for a couple of hours while their case was adjudicated, and they were either released or sent to a prison. What happened is that they built 8 cells, and they've been holding people there for over a week at a time. And some of you may have heard of Marcelo, who was incarcerated there a few weeks ago. He came out of that facility and told the story of how they were overcrowded cells, concrete floors, no beds. They were given a thin Mylar blanket, so they had to sleep on a cold floor with not enough protection, very little, insufficient food, overcrowding. There are some cells that are so crowded that people would have to take turns lying on the floor. No soap, no sanitary conditions, a toilet in the middle of the room, and people would have to turn around when somebody was using the toilet. They were in there for 24/7, no sunlight, no fresh air. They said that the only time that they were able to get a breeze was if somebody walked by the cell outside, and there was like a little breeze of air. If somebody was having a medical problem, didn't matter. If somebody was, females having monthly menstruation issues, no supplies. One woman was given a cup of water and told to just pour it over her head. And the guards are very, very mean to them, would not listen to their needs, and they were literally hungry the whole time they were there, and they didn't know what their fate was. Sometimes their attorneys were allowed in there, other times attorneys were refused entrance to the building. So we felt that this was obviously a horrific situation. You hear about it on the news, and here it is happening right in our backyard. So we felt compelled to do something again. And so this young couple contacted me, Laurie and Jared Berezin, a very, very nice young couple, and they just called me randomly and said, just wanted to reach out to you as a local clergy person, that we're having a vigil outside the ICE office once a week. We're standing out there for 4 hours. And so I said, I promise you I will get you people there. And so they contacted other local clergy as well. So the first week I went down there were about 5 to 10 people. Almost all of them were clergy. The second week, there were about 10. To make a long story short, this is our 17th week, and now we average, 2 weeks ago there were 470 people out there. It's spread all over the place, and we now have a Facebook page which is nearing 900 Facebook members. We have a mailing list that's got well over 700 people. I've personally made about five YouTube videos that have gotten hundreds of views. This woman who made the TikTok video about walking from the Burlington Mall to the ICE office, that's gotten over, I think, 240,000 views on TikTok. So we're really, really getting the word out there. And so who is coming to join us? It's people exactly like every single person sitting in this room. There are people of all ages, people coming with walkers. There are people. There are a couple of people who can't even walk, where they're in wheelchairs. We've had babies there. We've had young people there. And so we discussed what should we call ourselves, and we decided to call ourselves Bearing Witness, because that seemed to be a term that had a lot of backbone to it. And so what have we borne witness to while we've been there? I've been there 16 of the 17 weeks, and it's become almost like my second full-time job. Don't tell my congregation. but I'm just so uplifted by the work that we're all able to do, and what we're able to have, the impact we're able to have, not just on the ICE office, but on the immigrants who are coming there, and on the people who drive by and honk in agreement with us. But it's something that's really made a profound difference to every person who's joined us, and it has compelled them to tell others. So the word is spreading like crazy, and that's what we need to do, is to compel as many people as possible to do something about it. And thank you so much for giving us concrete ways of what we can do to try to help the situation. So I've personally witnessed a woman jumped out of her car hysterically crying, saying that ICE had just taken her husband on his way to work. He was doing nothing wrong. He had all the right legal papers. They just pulled him out of his car on his way to work and brought him to this office and sent him to Ohio, to a prison in Ohio. He had nothing but the clothes on his back, and she was there. She's now left alone with her 8-year-old daughter, and the two of them have no idea how they're going to sustain themselves or what's going to happen. Will they ever see him again? So she was bringing a big bag of clothes, hoping that the ICE office would send him his clothes, which of course, no way they would ever do that. 3 weeks ago, we were there and witnessed 2 young boys sitting on the front step of the office in tears. And what had happened is that They came with their mother, who had no place to leave them. Their mother went in for an appointment, and the ICE did not allow the children to go in with the mother. So they were sitting out there. It happened to be over 90 degrees out, and they were sitting there outside not knowing if they would ever see their mother again. So one of the other clergy team, actually Rod's successor, went over and gave them water and sat with them and sang with them and tried to help them feel better. One other week we witnessed a high-speed chase of a woman in a car and the state police chasing her into the parking lot, and they dragged her out of the car and put her in handcuffs right in front of us. And I also, the first iteration of this 4 years ago, right behind the building is a huge parking lot for vans. And those vans are constantly going in and out, bringing people in who they've arrested and taking people out and bringing them to prisons and other places. I myself saw the back door open of the building, and a bunch of people come out with their hands behind their back and their legs shackled. And there were 4 or 5 men and one woman, and the woman they were wearing orange jumpsuits. And I will never forget the look on that woman's face as first they put the men in, and she was just standing there with her hands behind her back, legs shackled, and she just looked like life was over, like just not knowing what was going to happen. So every single time we're there, people come into the parking lot to go in for appointments. We give them a thumbs up. We wave at them. We shout encouraging words to them. Sometimes they come over and thank us for being there to support them, and it's like the only bright spot in their horrible day is just knowing that they're not alone, that we are there with them. Now it's gotten to the point, this is evolving extremely rapidly. Jared and Laurie were doing all of this themselves, and they told me that they just can't do it anymore. It's become too big. So now we have a clergy organizing committee of 6 clergy who work with them and try to take some of the pressure off. We have somebody speak every week. We just had our state representative speak. People from different organizations speak. And so we try to support them and do whatever we can to help ameliorate the situation. But we just need to feel, I think every person needs to feel that they can go out and stand there and bear witness and make a difference for themselves as well as help the whole cause. But anyway, what I was going to say is that, so the police, it's entered a new phase. The police did not interfere with us at all. Like they even told us they were there to support us and to protect us in case anybody were to stage a counter protest. 2 weeks ago, the police decided that we were too much of a threat for the ICE building. So they came and told us that we had to, they limited where we were allowed to stand because they were afraid that we would rush the ICE building or we would, whatever. And I'm like our whole philosophy is peace and de-escalation. And we every single week we explained at the very beginning, we stand here in peaceful protest. And if anybody is not peaceful, you are not part of our group. But they decided they couldn't trust us. So they've been pushing us back, and could talk to you about the legal ramifications of First Amendment rights and how our rights are starting to be taken away from us. This past week, we had about 450 people there. It was in the mid-90s and extremely humid in the middle of the day, and we were telling people, don't come. This is a marathon, not a sprint. But over 400 people came, and somebody was singing some songs, and the Burlington police captain walked over to a loudspeaker system and was about to turn off the speaker. And Jared went over and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, it's too loud." I mean, it was too loud for him personally to be hearing that we were protesting in front of the ICE office. By the way, we also, during the hour that we're there, we give people a turn to read the Constitution at the ICE office to inform them about all of those parts of the Constitution which they are violating. So we had a huge confrontation with the police, and this coming week we'll see what happens. But the bottom line is that we are now large enough that we are really impacting the way people are seeing us. And I just also heard that a member of the ICE department went and spoke to somebody at the Burlington Mall to ask them not to allow us to park at the Burlington Mall. But the head of the Burlington Mall said they are absolutely welcome to park wherever they want. Anyway, we are really, really annoying them, and they're very upset by our presence, and we're getting a lot of publicity. So it's something, you can talk the talk, but for me personally, my rabbinate is walk the walk. And so this is what we're doing, and hopefully, I don't know where it's going, but we could end up having thousands of people there, and hopefully we will be able to do something to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves, and something which my people couldn't do for themselves. Hopefully we can succeed in doing that for others. Thank you.
Our hearts are all touched by that. Susan, thank you. I'm going to take an example from Michael and suggest that we just be quiet and breathe for a minute. We've barely touched the varieties of action, from serving to resisting, that faith communities might consider. Pro-immigrant letters to the editor from your congregation or individually. Worshiping with and getting to know an immigrant congregation. Advocating for legislation. Asking your select board for a statement of support, being part of a regular public rally, calling a state hotline if you see ICE activity, and including immigrant themes in your liturgy and prayers. Connecting with organizations like the Refugee Support Team, or the Cape Cod Coalition for Safe Communities, or an indivisible group, is another way to be involved. There are some good handouts on the table downstairs. Be sure to take some as you go. There are also some of the Know Your Right cards that were referred to here today. In a moment, we're going to sing our way out, which will feel good. But first, please join me in saying thank you to all our speakers today. Now, when we leave, I'm going to take these good folks and we're going to sneak down the back stairs and be in place in Fellowship Hall for when you all come down and join us. And they'll be ready to receive your questions or comments or just any kind of conversation you'd like to have. And there are lots of refreshments down there too. So let's sing our faith together. Juliet, you are here. Yes, ready to play. It's a familiar melody. The melody for Morning Has Broken. with some new words that you'll find on the back of your program. And then let us go forth to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Juliet? Would you like to stand to sing, if you may? Abraham journeyed to a new country. Sarah went with him, journeying too. Slaves down in Egypt fled Pharaoh's army. Ruth left the home and people she knew. Some heard the promise God's hand would bless them. Some fled from hunger, famine, and pain. Some left a place where others oppressed them. All trusted God and started again. Did they know hardship? Did they know danger? Who shared a home or gave them some bread? Who reached a hand to welcome the stranger? Who saw their fear and gave hope instead? God, our own families came here from far land. Strangers, aliens too. May we reach out and offer a welcome, as we have all been welcomed by you. Go in peace.